Jaguar sold 49 cars in Europe in April 2025, not 49,000, not 4,900, 49. 1 year earlier, it had sold 1,961 in the same month, which means sales collapsed by 97.5%. Jaguar's explanation is almost as shocking as the number itself. This was intentional. The company says it stopped building its old cars before the new ones were ready because the entire brand is being rebuilt from the ground up. Believe that explanation, and Jaguar may be attempting one of the boldest luxury reinventions in modern automotive history. Reject it, and a century-old British icon may have deliberately emptied its own showrooms, alienated its customers, shrunk its dealer network, survived a cyber attack that cost Britain billions, and then placed everything on a new electric car expected to cost around $130,000 or more. That's the contradiction at the center of this story. Jaguar looks like a company collapsing, while insisting that the collapse is part of the plan. And the deeper you go, the stranger that plan becomes. The problem started long before 49 cars. For years, Jaguar occupied an awkward position in the luxury market. It wasn't exclusive enough to compete comfortably with brands like Bentley, but it also lacked the volume, consistency, and market power of companies like BMW. So in 2021, Tata Motors introduced a strategy called Reimagine. The goal was not to rescue Jaguar by selling more versions of the same thing. It was to turn Jaguar into something much smaller, much more expensive, fully electric, and far more exclusive. Fewer cars, higher margins, wealthier customers. That sounds clean on a strategy slide. The execution was far more extreme. Jaguar killed the XE, then the XF, then the F-Type, one of the car's enthusiasts most closely associated with the brand. The E-Pace disappeared. The I-Pace disappeared. By early 2025, Jaguar had reached a position it had not faced since 1948. Dealerships effectively had no new Jaguars to sell. Former design chief Ian Callum later said replacement programs for the XF, XJ, F-Type, and F-Pace had already progressed deeply into development before being canceled. In other words, Jaguar didn't simply run out of products. It chose to abandon products that could have kept the lights on during the transition. The company burned the bridge before the new road was finished. There is also an important distinction between failure and planned contraction. Jaguar's defenders are right that volume was supposed to fall. The entire strategy depends on selling fewer cars at much higher prices, so judging the future business by old mass-market volume targets would miss the point. The problem is that planned contraction still has to preserve brand heat. If customers stop thinking about you during the gap, if dealers lose patience, and if the public associates your new identity with controversy rather than aspiration, then the pause becomes more expensive than the spreadsheets predicted. That is the real risk Jaguar accepted when it removed the old lineup before the new one could take over. Then came the rebrand. In November 2024, Jaguar introduced its new identity without introducing a car. The famous leaping cat disappeared from the center of the message. A minimalist J arrived. The campaign used the slogan "Copy Nothing," with stylized models, bright landscapes, and lines like "Delete Ordinary." The problem was obvious the moment people watched it. There wasn't a Jaguar vehicle anywhere in the 30-second ad. The internet did what the internet does. The campaign generated roughly 100 million views in 48 hours, but much of that attention came wrapped in ridicule, confusion, or outright hostility. Elon Musk responded with 4 words: "Do you sell cars?" A major German poll found 93% of respondents felt the new direction no longer seemed connected to Jaguar. Design chief Jerry McGovern later acknowledged the backlash had become intense enough that Jaguar abandoned the follow-up campaign it had planned. That matters because companies do not normally cancel an entire marketing sequence when the first piece lands exactly as intended, and the timing could hardly have been worse. Jaguar was asking the public to imagine a completely new identity at the same moment its dealerships had almost nothing physical to prove what that identity meant. A controversial ad can survive when there's a brilliant product sitting beside it. Jaguar had the ad first, and the evidence later. By April 2025, the sales numbers made the whole situation impossible to ignore. 49 registrations across Europe compared with 1,961 a year earlier. January through April sales were down more than 75%. Globally, Jaguar sold 26,862 vehicles during the 2024 to 2025 fiscal year. In 2018, it sold 180,833. That is an 85% decline in 7 years. Now compare Jaguar with its own sister brand. The Land Rover Defender alone sold roughly 115,000 units over a comparable period, meaning one SUV outsold Jaguar's entire worldwide lineup by more than 4 to 1. Jaguar's defense is straightforward. Of course sales collapsed because production was intentionally stopped. And that is partly fair. You cannot sell vehicles you are not producing. Empty factories and empty dealer lots will create ugly registration numbers no matter how strong the badge once was. But that explanation only answers half the question. The bigger question is why Jaguar chose to create such a long gap in the first place. Other automakers have moved toward electric vehicles without removing almost everything from showrooms at once. Land Rover itself continued selling vehicles and generating profit during its own transition. Jaguar decided the interruption was worth the risk, so the 49-car month may have been predictable. But predictable does not mean harmless. The same logic applies to Jaguar's dealer network. In the United States, the brand has gone from roughly 200 retailers a few years ago to about 80 today, a reduction of around 60%. Jaguar says this is deliberate too. If the future product is going to cost well over $100,000 and target a smaller group of high-net-worth customers, a dense national network designed for higher volume no longer makes sense. That argument has merit. Ultra-luxury brands often operate through fewer, more specialized locations. Jaguar also wants retailers that already understand Range Rover buyers and the expectations that come with serving customers spending six figures on a vehicle. But there's a darker interpretation. A company with fewer dealers, almost no inventory, collapsing registrations, and a polarizing brand identity can look exactly like a company retreating from the market. Intent matters internally, perception matters externally. And when customers, dealers, and investors have to keep being told that every visible sign of contraction is actually strategic, eventually the strategy has to produce something tangible. That something is supposed to be Jaguar's new electric era. Before it could arrive, however, the wider Jaguar Land Rover business was hit by a crisis that had nothing to do with design, pricing, or marketing. In late August 2025, engineers at Jaguar Land Rover's Halewood plant noticed unusual activity inside the company's IT systems. Within days, JLR confirmed it had suffered a major cyber attack. Investigators connected the breach to a hacking network linked with other high-profile attacks on British retailers that year. JLR responded by shutting down its IT systems around the world to contain the intrusion. That defensive move created a second disaster. Modern vehicle production depends on digital infrastructure for practically everything. Parts ordering, logistics, line scheduling, assembly coordinations, supplier communications, registrations, and dealer operations. When JLR disconnected the network, it also crippled its ability to build cars. Production stopped for 5 weeks. Major British facilities at Solihull, Wolverhampton, and Halewood went quiet. Operations in Slovakia, Brazil, and India were affected as well. JLR employs around 34,000 people directly in the United Kingdom, with roughly 120,000 more jobs tied to its wider supply chain. In September, total UK vehicle production fell 27%, creating the worst September for British car manufacturing since 1952. One cyber attack on one company had become a national industrial event, and this matters because luxury is unusually dependent on continuity. A mainstream buyer may tolerate a model changeover because price, practicality, and availability dominate the decision. A six-figure luxury buyer is paying for symbolism, confidence, service, and social meaning as much as transportation. Jaguar's strategy assumes those intangible qualities can be rebuilt quickly enough to support a price nearly twice its old average. That is a much harder task than engineering a fast electric car. The financial consequences were even bigger. JLR reported nearly £200 million in exceptional costs tied directly to the incident. The company swung to a quarterly pre-tax loss of £485 million after posting a healthy profit the previous year, while revenue fell 24%. But the broader economic estimate was more severe. The UK's Cyber Monitoring Centre calculated that the ripple effects across more than 5,000 businesses, suppliers, logistics companies, and dealerships caused between £1.6 and £2.1 billion in damage, roughly $2.5 billion. That made it the most financially damaging cyber attack in British history. The Bank of England specifically cited the disruption as one factor behind weaker UK economic performance in the third quarter of 2025. The government then approved a £1.5 billion loan guarantee to help suppliers survive and prevent the industrial chain around JLR from breaking apart. Think about what that means. Jaguar's parent company was already navigating one of the riskiest brand transformations in the car industry, and suddenly a cybersecurity failure became serious enough to require government-backed support for the businesses surrounding it. Production restarted in phases in early October, but the shutdown left a financial scar at exactly the moment Jaguar needed stability most. So by 2026, Jaguar wasn't dealing with one problem. it was carrying several at once. The lineup had been gutted before replacements were ready. The rebrand had triggered global ridicule and forced the company to cancel planned follow-up marketing. Sales had fallen to levels that sounded almost fictional. The American dealer network had been cut by more than half. Then the cyber attack slammed JLR's factories and finances. And sitting on top of all of that was the recovery plan. Convince customers to pay dramatically more for the new Jaguar than they had paid for the old one. Jaguar's North American leadership has said the brand's average transaction price had been around $70,000. The target for the next era is roughly $130,000. That is not an ordinary move up market. It is nearly a doubling of the average purchase price. Jaguar also expects most of its previous customers not to follow. Some estimates suggest only 10 to 15% of the old buyer base may carry into the ultra-luxury strategy. That means the company is not merely asking loyal Jaguar owners to spend more. It is deliberately walking away from most of them and hunting for an entirely different customer, one already comfortable shopping in Bentley territory. The car intended to make this strategy believable first appeared as the Type 00 concept, a dramatic four-door electric Grand Tourer built around Jaguar's new dedicated electric architecture. The design was impossible to ignore, which may have been the entire point. Supporters called it one of the most interesting Jaguars in years. Critics compared it to a prop from a fantasy film. Either way, indifference was not the reaction. The production car, referred to as the Type 01, is expected to be fully revealed in New York in October 2026, with pricing targeted around $130,000 and potentially pushing beyond $150,000, with options. At that level, Jaguar is no longer asking to be compared with the premium middle of the market. It is trying to stand near the entry point of Bentley. And this is where the case for Jaguar becomes more credible than the headlines suggest. Jerry McGovern has already helped reshape Range Rover into one of the most commercially powerful luxury names in the world. The formula of lower volume, higher prices, stronger margins, and carefully controlled exclusivity is not fantasy. Porsche has benefited from moving parts of its range further upmarket. Range Rover has done the same. Jaguar could, in theory, sell far fewer cars than it once did, and still become a healthier business if each car produces dramatically more profit and the brand regains status. The October 2026 reveal therefore matters for more than styling. Jaguar has to answer basic questions the campaign could avoid: range, performance, charging, craftsmanship, software, rear seat comfort, service, and why this car deserves to sit beside brands that have spent decades protecting six-figure prestige. The concept created attention. The production version has to convert attention into deposits, and then deposits into repeatable demand. But the product has to carry more than product responsibility. The Type 01 is not simply launching as a new electric Grand Tourer. It is being asked to justify 2 years of decisions that look disastrous from the outside. It has to make the empty showrooms look intentional rather than desperate. It has to make the dealer cuts look premium rather than defensive. It has to make the controversial rebrand feel like the opening chapter of a coherent identity instead of a disconnected advertising experiment. And it has to do all of that after Jaguar Land Rover spent weeks in the news for a cyber attack severe enough to disrupt the British economy. A beautiful car can change perception quickly, but trust is slower. Wealthy buyers spending $130,000 to $150,000 are not only buying design, they are buying confidence that the company will support the car, maintain the network, preserve residual values, deliver software, provide parts, and still feel relevant years later. Jaguar is asking those buyers to make that leap precisely when the brand has been demonstrating how radical its appetite for disruption really is. There is another irony here. The original Jaguar reputation was built around a different kind of luxury proposition: dramatic design and serious performance at prices that often undercut more exotic rivals. The new plan flips that equation. Instead of being the daring alternative that gives you more than expected for the money, Jaguar wants price itself to become part of the exclusivity. That may attract a new audience, but it also changes the emotional contract people have had with the badge for generations. Now return to the number that started this story: 49 cars in 1 month across Europe. Jaguar is correct that the number does not mean exactly what it would mean for a normal automaker. The company intentionally stopped producing most of the vehicles that would have generated those sales. But that does not make the number meaningless. It reveals the scale of the bet. Jaguar voluntarily accepted a period in which the old business would almost disappear before the new one had proven itself. Then the brand's marketing triggered backlash. Then the dealer footprint shrank dramatically. Then a cyber attack hit the wider company with historic force. And now one new electric Grand Tourer is supposed to transform those separate crises into evidence that the reset was worth it. Maybe it can. McGovern has credibility. The ultra-luxury strategy has successful precedents. A smaller Jaguar selling fewer but much more profitable vehicles could be stronger than the larger confused Jaguar that came before it. But the opposite outcome is just as plausible. If the new buyers do not arrive in sufficient numbers, Jaguar will have abandoned its old market before securing a new one. That is not reinvention. That is a vacuum. And that is why the 49-car headline matters. It is not really a story about one terrible sales month. It is a story about a company choosing maximum disruption on several fronts at once, then betting that future desirability will outweigh present damage. Jaguar cleared the product slate, changed the visual identity, reduced the retail network, survived an industrial-scale cyber crisis, and is now moving its target price from around $70,000 to roughly $130,000, while expecting perhaps 85 to 90% of previous customers to stay behind. Few legacy brands have ever attempted a repositioning this severe while under this much pressure. If the Type 01 lands perfectly, Jaguar could turn one of the ugliest transitions in automotive history into proof that a struggling heritage brand can become relevant by refusing to protect its past. If it misses, critics will point back to those empty showrooms and say the warning signs were visible long before the comeback car arrived. So which story are we watching? The painful middle of a brilliant reinvention, or the slow-motion exit of a famous name chasing a customer that never shows up? If you enjoy digging past the headline and into what the numbers actually mean, like the video, subscribe to MotorZen, and tell me which side you're on, because Jaguar's next move will decide whether those 49 cars become a footnote or an obituary.